Hi, I'm Kenton, and this is Kenton Knows. In this video, I'm going to share some of my thoughts on negotiations as it applies to real estate home buying or small investment properties, and negotiating with parties involved in these transactions. I will start with some general negotiation advice, then move into specific points of negotiation for real estate sales contracts. Hopefully this video will give you the knowledge to put yourself in a stronger position to negotiate your next real estate deal. If you like this video, please hit the like button, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing to my channel. In the broadest sense, negotiations are between two parties, and there is normally a zone or area where both parties will agree. If we are talking strictly about money, there is a price the buyer is willing to pay and the price the seller is willing to sell. Obviously, the seller wants to get as much above the minimum price they're willing to sell the item, and the buyer wants to spend as little as possible, staying as far as possible below their maximum price. The area that overlaps is the zone where the deal can be made. If there's no overlap, then a deal is not possible between these two parties. It gets even more complicated when there are more points in the deal, such as time, quality, services, specific items, or other factors included in the negotiation. In real estate, there are some sellers who only care about price, but many care about more than just price, with time usually being the other most important factor to a real estate deal. In an effort to get you thinking about negotiations a little differently, I want to start with the orange exercise. I was first introduced to a version of this during a negotiation class in graduate school, and I believe it was first introduced by Roger Fisher in the book Getting to Yes about 40 years ago, with many iterations by various people over the years. In most versions of this exercise, there is one orange for sale, and both parties are given a different set of instructions with the same very large amount of money to buy the last remaining orange. In the instructions, there is a story with a lot of extra detail, but the main point is that one party only needs the orange peel, and the other party only needs the orange juice. In my class, there was a little added competition in that we were publicly to show the results of everyone's negotiation to the entire class to see who was the best negotiator. There are not any rules other than the scenario given to each participant, which makes them believe it is vital they get the entire orange regardless of the cost, and there is a fairly short time limit to the exercise as well. When you are in this situation, both parties feel very strongly that they need to buy the whole orange and will create elaborate stories to convince the other person why they need it. However, it is rare that the parties actually ask what the other party needs or if they only need a part of the orange. So they argue endlessly in a no-win situation or agree on something that is less than optimal, like splitting it in half or making one person pay all of their money for it. If either party actually takes the time to learn what the other person needs, since neither of them actually need the whole orange, they could agree to pay $1 for the orange and separate the components between the two of them, as there is no other buyer for any other part of the orange or the whole orange. Since both participants are trying to win the negotiation and feel strongly about why they need the orange, neither seems to actually take the time to learn about the other person's needs. The next time you're negotiating, think about this example, so you aren't missing an optimal solution that may result in a better deal for both parties. Ask more questions and be open to alternatives. Are there any areas in the deal that are really important to the other party but not important to you at all? If there are, you can use those points to help you get a better deal. And on the flip side, is there something that is really important to you but not very important to the other party? Every negotiation is different, but understanding how each component of the deal can have different values to either party can make you a much more successful negotiator. So remember to ask questions, and in the interest of protecting your own interests, I wouldn't show your cards by saying what issues are most important to you, as a savvy negotiator will use that against you. Before I get into some specific real estate related deal points, I want to talk about another dynamic which is specific to residential and small commercial real estate transactions. In these deals, the buyer, seller, or both are usually inexperienced participants, and the deal is very personal. This is much different than dealing with a person representing a larger company or a broker that is negotiating deals on a much more regular basis for transactions that are not really personal in nature. So be aware that these inexperienced participants may not always act rationally, logically, or even always in their own best interests. In these instances, I have found another tactic is important to use in an effort to get the deal done when dealing with these amateur negotiators. The concept is based on the fact that when you are dealing with amateur negotiators, they may be very emotional about the transaction. In these instances, you will not be able to explain, justify, or show that your emotions are more important or that their emotions are not relevant or valid. The emotional person will not hear anything you are saying and will discount anything you try to explain, as it clearly pales in comparison to what they are feeling or trying to get you to understand. So you need to realize you simply can't win an emotional argument with an emotional person. Instead, you need to find a way to repeat back to the person what they are saying so they know they have been heard. This is important. Make sure they feel heard. Next, try to remove the emotion and counter calmly with data and facts. It may take some time for the other party to realize you are not going to address their emotional argument, but if you remain calm and simply cite the data, you should be able to move the negotiation forward. On the other hand, if you are negotiating with a calm and logical person who is simply citing data and facts, then you need to appeal to their emotions. You need to explain why this is more emotional and it isn't just about the data. Even though the numbers may show one thing, if you can appeal to the emotional reasons behind the transaction, you may be able to make a little more progress for your position. Every transaction is different, but having more options in your tool belt will allow you to use the right tool for each particular negotiation to hopefully result in a better outcome for you. Now, let's get into some specific things to think about when you are negotiating a real estate purchase or sale. Surprisingly, the negotiation starts well before you write or receive an offer. From the moment you set foot in a property, you have already started negotiating, even if you haven't realized it yet. The goal here is to set yourself up to be in the strongest position possible and to have things of value to give up, even though they may not matter much to you. The main points you have at your disposal in the initial real estate contract negotiation are price, earnest money, tax proration, closing date, inspection period, furniture or fixtures, repair credits, a mortgage contingency, and how important this particular property is to you, or in other words, how badly do you want to buy or sell this property. Keep all of these items in mind when you view a property. Be aware that there are some things your agent cannot ask on your behalf, but if you are the buyer or seller, you can literally ask anything. The other party may not answer, but there are not really limits on what you can ask. With that in mind, here are some things to ask the agent or other person when buying or selling. Where are you moving to? Did you already buy a new house? Have you lived here a long time? What do you like about the area? If you are the seller, you ask, when is your lease up? Are you selling another house? Do you have kids? How old are they? Where do they go to school? Are you familiar with the area? Although you sound like you are just making conversation and being friendly, you are gathering information. Here you are trying to determine the date the other party needs to close for their kids to start the school year, or for when the seller may start to pay 2 mortgages, or to extend their lease, or find temporary housing, or any other circumstance which will create urgency for them to have to close this deal on a particular date. Many times people are eager to share they bought a new house or building a new one, got transferred, the landlord is selling the property, or whatever their situation is. Let them talk. They are giving you more information to use in the negotiation. Ask questions as if you care about them, even though you're really just trying to gain information about what is important to them. Ask about the price. Ask if they're negotiable. If you know about a lower priced recent sale, maybe bring it up. I was looking at 123 Main Street and it just sold for X, wondering what your thoughts are on that sale. Here you are introducing the idea that this house may be overpriced. If you are the seller, ask what you are looking for. How long have they been looking? What other houses have they liked? Sometimes you'll learn about their price range, or that they lost another house they liked. You can get a sense if they are getting frustrated and desperate, or are they just starting out. Ask about furniture. What stays and what goes with the seller. If you like anything, take note of it, especially the items that the seller thinks are unique and not really easily moved, like a pool table or outdoor play set. It may come in handy. As a buyer, I'm not saying you should act like you don't care, but definitely don't show much excitement about the property you like. Even if you like it, you should point out things that won't work well for you. Maybe you want a bigger garage or a yard. Maybe the flow isn't exactly how you'd design it, or the outside space isn't right off the kitchen, so you don't know where you'd put your grill. These need to be things that will be bigger renovations, or things that just can't be changed about the property. Even if they aren't an issue for you personally, they might be something the seller has already heard and is aware they are issues. You are giving the impression this isn't exactly what you want, but if you do make an offer, it's because you're settling. Regardless of your true feelings, you don't want the seller to know you will agree to whatever you need in order to buy the property. You want the seller to know this only works at the right price and terms as you're settling, even if you are not. Don't bring up or use anything you know will come up in an inspection. The reason I say that is if you do, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot. When the inspection comes back and it says you need a new roof, but you already pointed it out and used it to negotiate the contract price, it's a lot harder to ask for a reduction again using the same repair item. Any savvy seller will say that it was already included in the original negotiation. Now, we have come to writing your offer, or if you are the seller, receiving the offer. Remember, as the buyer, there isn't a bad offer as long as you have justification of why it is low, and as a seller, you don't need to be offended by an offer. It's just an initial offer. As a buyer, you should base your offer on comparable properties, and then deduct something for repairs or renovations you will need to do to make it what you are looking for, and then take a little more off. Of course, there is a limit to what's reasonable here, but I would start at the low end of reasonableness. If you do run into a situation where the other party doesn't want to respond, don't negotiate against yourself. Ask your agent to tell the other agent that you will definitely be willing to come up, but it is your first time doing this and you went a little aggressive, but you can't negotiate against yourself. Usually, if the agent talks to the other agent about it, they can get a counter, even if it isn't much of one. Of course, the seller won't accept your initial offer, but it's a starting point. Now here is where you use your knowledge about the other party. If you know the seller has a specific date in mind, you need to offer to close on a different date by a few weeks or so. If you like some furniture or something else in the property, add it to the contract. Set the earnest money low. I don't even like to do 5%. I prefer to start with a round number around 1 or 2% of the offer price. For the mortgage contingency, I use the mortgage rate for a 20% down payment, even though the offer shows we are only putting down 5 or 10% with no points or fees, which essentially means that the loan as written in the offer is impossible to get, and it offers you an out if needed. The tax proration should be a little on the high side, but not outrageous, as you hope the seller will just let it slide. You can also add in a request for a closing cost credit or repair allowance if something was really bad and it would be impossible not to notice it. Something like the whole house is painted in a dark blue or black, and so everyone knows you'll need to repaint it. The reason you put all of this in the initial offer is to make the seller take a position as to what is important. In my experience, the seller will normally only counter a few points, but not all of them, so you should start with a small win there. Next, the seller will surely counter with the important issues, which are price and closing date. If they counter with any of the other points, you are in the perfect position to make it a big deal, that you begrudgingly give in on those points, and most people will be willing to give in to you more on the other items when you are showing your willingness to give in on these points. The nice thing here is that you already knew you were being aggressive, so when you give up these points, it's more psychological than actually giving up anything you weren't planning to do anyway. Depending on how you see the negotiation going, you may give up a few things and backtrack on the date by a week or so and come up in price some to show some movement, but you may hold back a few items so it isn't just a price negotiation in the next round. Getting back to the furniture you may have included in the offer. Depending on your situation, this may or may not be important to you, but it does have value. In one condo purchase, I had written that the seller would include the surround sound system and a large grill that was on the condo's private roof deck. During the negotiation, the seller said the value of these items was $10,000. My client and I agreed that was a gross exaggeration for the value of these items, and they were no longer new, but we didn't counter or address it until we had agreed on all other points. Once we had an agreement, we told the seller that we no longer wanted the grill or surround sound system, so we'd like to reduce the agreed upon sale price by another $10,000. The seller wasn't happy, but did honor the original valuation of those items, and we signed the contract less than $10,000. Each of these points can be used as either a distraction or a way to show the other party that you are giving up things that appear to be important to you even though they may not be, as you set up the offer to appear that way. On the sell side, you can't let these concessions matter to you. You need to know what is fair and normal, and getting the contract back to a normal and fair place shouldn't make you feel like the buyer gave up anything. The mortgage contingency needs to be just that, a contingency that is based on current mortgage rates and terms. The tax prorations should be what is normal and customary in your area. The other furniture requests should only be considered if you want to sell them, and then you should value the items at whatever you feel you could sell them for on an online marketplace minus the annoyance of trying to sell them. So, as a seller, it really comes down to price and closing date while keeping the contingencies and anything else to a normal and reasonable value and timeframes. Now that you have a signed contract, the property is taken off the market, and as a buyer, your hope is that if there were any other buyers interested, they'll move on to another property. As the buyer, you want to take the full time period to do your attorney approval and let the seller know what inspection issues are found, if any. The reason you want to wait and drag it out a little is that this puts more pressure on the seller to accept any additional demands or concessions that you want to make. The seller is paying their mortgage, taxes, utilities, etc., and doesn't want that week or more to go to waste by starting all over and putting the property back on the market due to these minor inspection issues that any other buyer would probably also learn about during their inspection. So when you ask for repair credit, the seller should be willing to work with you, as their only alternative is to go back to the market, and it will probably cost more than the credit you're asking for anyway. If you are the seller, you can try to ask the buyer to sign the as-is clause in the contract in exchange for you agreeing to the buyer's closing date and price. This will hopefully prevent the buyer from coming back to you for inspection issues. Of course, the buyer can still come ask you for credit anyway, as both parties know that saying no at that point essentially means the deal is either accepted as written or it is canceled. But until it is all final and signed, you can still try to negotiate items. Now, at this point, the negotiation is essentially over, and both parties should sign the final contract. However, I will add that you should do your final walkthrough after the seller has moved out, but before you close, to ensure everything was removed from the property and there wasn't any additional damage. If there are any issues, definitely take a picture and bring it to closing to hopefully ask for a credit at closing. I hope this video helps you to be better prepared when you negotiate your next real estate purchase or sale. If you like this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. If you found this video useful, please share it with someone else who might enjoy seeing it. Thank you for watching Kenton Knows, and I wish you the best of luck with all of your real estate investments.